I'm gonna lose the box for a minute. I'm gonna make a plane. So one of the things you'll see in a lot of photo setups is they'll have some kind of backdrop that sort of easily smooths up so that there isn't a crease or corner in the back of the scene. So if we go into edit mode, we can take our furthest edge here and extrude it on the Z-axis up, then get that same edge that we had before and do a bevel. But while you're beveling, if you scroll the reel, you'll get a curve for your bevel. And then I'm gonna tab out. So there's the start of my backdrop. With my object selected, I can then say shade smooth. Is set up a target for my camera. I'll create an empty. I like to use empty arrows. Go over here to object, we can rename this to, and then we can go to our camera, add a constraint, track 2, camera track. If I move my camera track around, my camera will follow. Add a view for my camera. I can hit 0 and now I'm in camera mode and I can scroll to zoom in where I want to be. I'm going to shift to overhead view so that I can pull this out and get a better framing. It might be helpful if my backdrop were wider, so I'm going to select the whole thing and scale on Y. I'm going to get rid of my light source and I'm going to create another plane. Grab on Z and move it up a little bit. This is a good time for me to check my render settings. I'm going to be in cycles because cycles is going to give me a nice clean result, and GPU compute if you have it, right? Makes things much faster. So now I can pop into rendered mode. Here, I'm going to use this bottom area that I've left up for shader. In my shader, I'm going to add a new shader. I'll call it light box. And you can use the principled BSDF shader. It has all sorts of great stuff. If you bring up emission, set it to white, you'll start to see some glow, but we can crank up that brightness to whatever we want it to be. We put this in here. You can hear my video card is starting to ramp up speed here, getting ready for takeoff. It might be helpful to have a basic subject. So I'm just going to put in an icosphere. There we go. Now we can see something. So I'm going to do the same trick that I did with my camera tracker. Empty. Get another set of arrows. And now my empty is selected. Go back to object, we can rename it. I'm going to get my plane again and do the same trick. Constraints, track 2, light track. I can move my light and point it wherever I want it to point. I'm going to put in a geometry node inside of my shader editor. Let's do a simple diffuse shader, and I'm going to make my diffuse shader black. And let's also add an emissive shader. It's basically what I just did, except it is it's just emission and nothing else. Okay, so let's put that in place, and let's add a third shader called a mix shader. And then we can connect the mix shader here, and we can connect these two shaders to the mix. So if I put it in here, no, let's make it brighter than that. There we go. Okay, so it's bright, but the backside is black. So just a quick moment to take a look at that. There we go. If you want all of the lights to point to the same thing, which I often use, right? You can just click on the light itself and then Shift D rather, and Shift D again. So all of these lights are independent, but they're pointing to the same tracker. They're all looking at the same light track. So I can control where I want to target them. Click each one of these lamps and move them around, maybe move them up a little bit. So from the point of view of my camera, I mean, it still seems awfully bright, but they're also all following the same texture. So if I lower this, they all get lowered, right? And of course, you could create different textures for different lamps, and that's very easy to do. If you click one of the lamps, I'll click this one that's in the back right now. You can choose this little new icon, and it now creates a separate texture. Lightbox is working on the other two, right? It was working on 3 of them at first. And now Lightbox 1 is working on this one specifically. So maybe I'll call this Lightbox back. And then I can do things like change the color. Now, only this one is going to be bright red. And you can see here up at the top that it's turning red. And I can also crank up the brightness, make it overwhelm the other two. Right? But for now, maybe I'll just make it a little cooler. And then I can do the same thing to my light box on the right. New. Let's make this one a little warmer. And the last one here uses Lightbox, but I'm going to rename it to Lightbox left. And I'll leave it white. There we go. So now you could really put any subject in here. Also, you can make your shadows softer by scaling up your lamps. Just know that the bigger they get, the brighter they're going to get. So I might crank this one up and then lower this down. Try to get rid of shadows. But the bigger it gets, the softer it becomes, because there's more area to work with. There, now I have, if I take a look at my big picture here, I have one decent shadow in the background, and then the other two are really starting to take a back seat to that. And maybe this basic photo studio scene will be of use to you at some point. Thanks very much for joining me. Bye-bye.